welcome back to the Butterfly House with Threaded with Fibre. Thank you for joining me and coming back to share some more stories. It's been a funny old fortnight since I last saw you. The weather has been, well, unusual to say the least. It's gone from everything from snow to sunshine. Snow being quite brief, but nonetheless a bit of a sleety shower at one point yesterday. And in one day we had 3 hailstorms, which started off really quite tiny and quite exciting, and then the second one happened a little bit later and was larger and noisier, and then the third one, which happened very quickly after the second one stopped, it was literally cannonballs hitting the roof. Now I'm exaggerating for effect there, of course, but it was like someone emptying their marble jar on top of the roof of my studio, and it was quite exciting. But I think the sufferers were the goldfish on that one. They're in the pond out there, and they were happily swimming around. And then the next minute, down comes the hailstones and disappear in all the reeds and things. It was quite funny. They were all right. I counted them after the event, and they were all fine. So I hope you're all well and have enjoyed your last fortnight and have achieved lots of lovely things. I have certainly been knitting like a demon. I've watched a lot of podcasts, and there is a theme running through that I want to touch on very briefly, because I feel it touched me and the experiences that I've had in my working life. I'm drinking coffee, by the way, which is not me at all, is it? I've done that once, haven't I, on the podcast? And I made that one myself. MrBB came in about 10 minutes ago with this lovely hot cup of coffee that he's made me. And yeah, it's much nicer than the one I had to go at. So yeah, the things that I've been listening to on the podcast, it's been quite moving, really, sometimes. The general theme, and I'm keeping it as a general thread. There are people who share their passion and their love of what they do. Like myself, you put yourself out there. From my own perspective, I do it because I feel very strongly about what I do in terms of the importance of these crafts and how we should all work in some way, if we can, to keeping them alive, to keeping them relevant. And there are a lot of young people who do that very, very well. Personally, I plod along with what I've learned from a child to my advancing years now, and the wish to share it. I didn't have the family background that a lot of people do when they talk about their mothers and their grandmothers, telling them what they've done and how they did it and teaching them their tricks and their techniques. I was largely self-taught with a little support from my grandmother, and I do soon hope that my daughter will engage in a desire to want to carry it on. She's not showing much interest right now because she's 13, she's having fun, that's fine. I have taught her to Tunisian crochet, and she took to that like a duck to water, so I have high hopes. However, there are a lot of people, when they talk about passions, and that could be in any genre, you emotionally can open yourself up to vulnerability, and so a comment or criticism, which is it? The thumbs up, the thumbs down. I was asked on as a comment on one of my videos to make some adjustments, technical adjustments, to help that individual to enjoy listening more to the podcast. And I saw that as a comment, which is indeed how it was given, and hope to do those adjustments this time round, my dear. But I didn't see it as a criticism. However, I could, if I was in a vulnerable place, definitely do that. And the theme that seems to have been picked up in one or two places is how these poor people, and that sounds terribly patronising, doesn't it? I don't mean it to be patronising. I genuinely care about how much a comment can be perceived as a criticism. And the reason why I mention it is because I want to share something with you that I used to share. Now, bear in mind, this was designed for young children, but I think it's a relevant way of unpacking what you see in front of you and what you hear. I personally am a visual learner with touches of kinesthetic thrown in. I like to see to learn, but I like to physically do things too, to implant the learning in my mind. And so I designed this exercise that I used to do with children. Now, we all know when we're young, and we can do it as adults too, that we see something, we hear something, and our perceptions of what we hear and see can sometimes be quite entrenched through what we've experienced in the past, entrenched in our relationship with the person who we are dealing with, who is commenting. And so our reactions are born from those experiences. And so what I used to do with children, and I'm going to ask you now to visualise with me. I used to take a pot of pens, and bearing in mind when you work in a school there are lots of pots of pens, and here's my pot of pens, and I very carefully arranged them prior to my session with my child. And on one section would be the blue pens, another section might be red, and another green, depending on what I had at the time. And the child would talk about how the ill will and the comment, and it's not fair, and I'm so upset, and they've hurt my feelings, and all of those things that children say and do. And I used to hold the pen up after a little bit of an introduction on what I was planning to do. And I'd say, oh, can you just tell me what colour pens I've got in my pot? Oh, I can see blue. Oh, can you? But my pot's got green pens in it. No, they're blue pens. Look, blue, I can see blue pens. Oh, I can see green pens. That's strange, isn't it? And I'd put the pot down, and I might talk about a little more about the issue, and then I'd pick up my pen pot again and turn it. What colour pens can you see now? Oh, I can see green pens, but they're blue pens. But looking at my pot from a different perspective, a different place, you can see green pens now. Like I saw green pens. Yeah, says the child. And so you can see where this is going, of course. So what I would encourage people to consider, maybe, what I do, maybe, is a fairer way of saying this, is that when a comment is out there, or a criticism, is to reverse the position that I stand in and become the giver and not the receiver of the comment, and look at how they might see what they see to say what they say, and then maybe consider it as something to work with, and indeed start up a conversation. So if that is of any help to anybody out there who struggles with the comments and the criticisms, I have them all the time, and I don't mind to a degree, but I also do mind very much. And on that note, I will move into some pieces of work that I have finished, which I lay open for your comment or criticism. So, lots of things finished today. I will start with the socks, of course. These are my vanilla socks by My Knitted Heart. I don't know the individual designer. It's not written on the pattern that I printed out, but it's a blog, I think, called My Knitted Heart. And they're finished in time for the birthday. The birthday itself date was the 25th, which has been and gone, but we've discovered that the gentleman's not coming for a little while. He's not coming till next Saturday, so all that rush. Anyway, they're done. Now, this is a pattern I've done once before. I did it for myself. It was the second pair of socks I did, and I loved them, and they fit perfectly, and they're beautiful. I then did this same pattern for the young man for his Christmas present last year, and fit perfectly, really happy with them. This time, I'm a little nervous. I'm a little nervous that they're not going to fit. And I think it has a lot to do with the yarn. It is, I think I just told you about it before, it's hot socks. Now, this is how I reference all my work. I'll very quickly show you that, simply because a lot of people do knitting journals, don't they? And I'm afraid I don't, for one reason alone. Well, no, two reasons. One, I can't find a really nice book that I like with strong enough paper. And two, it's all too fussy for me. And I don't like the way the book won't fold shut afterwards. Okay, so that's my OCD done. That's my OCD moment for this week. So what I do is I have this very pretty box. And if you watching last week's episode, you will recognise the paper pattern. It's the same as my socks in a box. I have this, and then I have 3 hat box sizes. And so inside here is my filing system of all the pieces that I have done. At the back is some of last year's things with their ball band tickets in there, which, having slightly modified the way I do things, I now attach them rather than just keep them in a big lump. Just put that safely back on there so I don't knock it over. And so each card gives me all the details of my knitting experience that I need to note. Any adjustments that I make to the pattern, I put on the pattern, which is then filed in a separate place. So if I want to look back, I just simply find the pattern in the box. So if we look at this particular one, the vanilla socks that I did for my stepson, as I say, I think it's the wool that has put me off. It's Hot Socks by Grundle. I'll bring that really in close so you can see. It's a fine wool. It's quite hefty. It's quite robust. Now that is a good thing for the person I've knitted the socks for, because he spends a lot of time without his shoes on. And so being robust, I think, is a good thing. The mix in this sock is your standard 75-25 wool and poly. So it's no different in that respect. But I would imagine it's quite a coarse wool or a mix. It doesn't say any details on there. I'm not even going to guess because I don't want to lead anyone in the wrong direction. Suffice it to say, soaked and blocked, they're quite supple and quite soft, but they still have some fight about them. As I say, happy with that. It's a good thing. But because the yarn is a little bit more dense in its nature, my worry is that the socks are going to be just that little bit too snug. They fit me slightly too long, and his feet are slightly bigger than mine, but I can't remember how much wider they are. So if I were to do anything differently next time I knit this pair of socks, it would be to use a larger needle so that the material would be less dense. But I'm happy with them. They come up very nicely. The stitch is a very neat stitch on them. I'm using every opportunity to stretch them a little as I show you. The pattern is a good old faithful with the rib up the side to keep them nice and close fit to the ankle and leg. Then I have kept them quite long because he's a cyclist, so he has quite muscular calves, so I've kept them quite short. I like the colour, I like the stripe. The heels and toes, I don't think I mentioned that last time. It was a random, I did look, it's just a random ball of wool that I had in my stash. It's 100% wool, I do know that, 4-ply. And it's just a perfect match to those gold stripes. So this and the cuff and the heel are just a random ball. Anyway, I'm pleased with them. I had a fair amount of yarn left. I have enough yarn left over to make myself a shorty pair of socks. Normally I know how much I've got left on here. I have a very small set of jewellery scales that I weigh what's left, just in case I want to do it again and reuse something left in my stash. Just up there somewhere. Not sure I'm pointing in the right place anyway. On the top of one of the cupboards I have a large bag of leftovers, and the sizes of the balls vary from something really quite small to something quite large. I haven't got an example here. Well, that for instance is a good example of a lot of what's left, and that wouldn't knit a pair of socks, but I've got some with more in, and it's quite nice to be able to really define that weight. So this set of scales goes down to, it kicks off its weight at 1 gram and then goes up from there. So anything less than a gram is not an awful lot of use anyway, is it? I keep all my scraps actually. I've got a large bowl of them over there because of my sewing and embroidery work, and I use them a lot in my own personal work for my store. So I keep everything. Literally. We're heaving. So there we go. Socks done. Happy with those. And please, please, please let them fit. I'm sure they'll be fine. He'll force them on because he's sweet and he won't want to be rude. So that's the first object finished. There we go. Second one is the Hochi Locatelli shawl that I was doing as a bit of an experiment. Let your heart unwind. Yeah. Am I happy with it? Yes, I am. It's not going to do for me what I want it to do. I wanted it to be bigger and drapier. Now that I know how this yarn works, and I told you before that I had it in 3 or 4 different colour groups because I bought it at such a bargain price. Now I know what it does and how it works and what happens to it when you wash and block. I will make sure the patterns that I pick will work and dance with the yarn better. However, I'm still happy with what I've got, and it's still a very useful little scarf, and it is going to be for summer something more to wear close to the neck. It's as light as a feather. It's like a dragonfly's wing. In fact, it really is like a dragonfly's wing, isn't it? The pattern came out beautifully. Once I got on top of what I was at with the short rows and the lace making, etc., really happy with it. The drape is beautiful. It will wear really nicely. Obviously I haven't blocked the ends in. I probably won't do that until I actually decide I want to wear it, and then I will very quickly block them in, sew them in. Silly me. It'll go away and wait to be worn with those ends flapping around, I expect. And it just fills the space at the neck if it were cool. In my Instagram I showed it because it's quite stretchy and quite forgiving of what you do to it. I could even tie it in a little bow. I think that's the beauty of cotton, isn't it? And it will make quite a nice little, under a summer jacket maybe. Yeah, I like that a lot. And it's, of course, for me, a dream because of my issues with wool. So I'm very happy with it. That is your reference for the yarn. Katia Japur, mercerized cotton. I used a 3.75mm with a 100cm circular because, well, actually I didn't really need to use the 100cm circular. I picked it because I wasn't 100% sure what my longest length was going to be, but it is only ever that much as you work this way along the shawl. So I could have used a shorter needle, which might have made it go quicker. Doesn't really matter. This is a 100-gram ball, a 50-gram ball, sorry, and it's 280 meters of lace weight mercerized cotton. And I used approximately 70 grams, so I had quite a chunk of the ball left. I will show you what I had left. That's a 50-gram ball, and it's a 30-gram ball. So I now have 80 grams. So I could literally do that shawl again, a little bigger. I won't. And I'm sure I'll find a use for that somewhere in my life. The modification I made to it is, as I described last time, I added in an extra repeat. So I added in one of those and one of those extra to give myself more of that. That's how I follow the line, that deeper section. And what I wanted it to do was to be more for shoulder warmth over a summer dress, and it's not really big enough. I mean, I suppose it could be if I just gave it a little bow up there, perhaps over the right outfit. I suppose it could be, or a brooch maybe. Oh, now I'm going to get it caught on me, aren't I? There we are. So all in all, I'd say yes, I'm happy with it. I view it as a progress of learning with this one because of the newness of working with the mercerised cotton. When you start to work with it, and this is what I wanted to particularly highlight on, in its ball state, it has a little bit of a gloss. Now, you may pick that up on camera. I can see it here. It's not sunny enough really, but I think we pretty much all know what mercerised cotton looks like. It's a softer one than you would normally expect from mercerised cotton. And I feared that once it went in its plunge and was blocked and stretched, that almost sheen effect would be lost, but it's not, which is rather reassuring to see. It still has exactly the same feel and sheen to it as it did in its ball. So very happy with it in terms of the learning process. Lots of exciting ideas to do with that. I might even endeavour to do something completely for myself and just let my needles take me somewhere. They're beautiful colour choices that I have. The next one I'm going to do with that yarn is this one, because this is more my colour palette. I like that a lot. And that colour number, if indeed you can still buy this yarn, is colour 207, no names on them. And the other one that I may mix and match with that, I don't actually have, because I think I've earmarked it for another project. Yeah, watch this space on that one. So that's 2 finished items. And now we come to, one of my favourite things ever that I've made. And this is a Mina Phillips test knit. I know she's published the pattern now, and it's called the Budding Bluebells Shawl. She's doing a knit along with Nicole from Hugh Loco, and they're both hosting the knit along, and it starts on the 1st of May, I believe, and finishes somewhere on the end of June. So it's quite a nice long time to knit the shawl. I don't think you need that long. It's a really beautiful rhythmic knit. Its size is dependent on how far you want to go with it. You can stop and make quite a small one, or you can just keep going and it could be even bigger than mine. I believe that Mina has the chatter thread for the cowl on her Ravelry page, and Nicole Hugh Loco has the FO thread. There's prizes for both, should you whichever one you enter into. Personally, I don't, if I do a knit along, which I don't do very often, I like to do a knit along item, but I very rarely put it in, and I almost never chatter. It's not very good, is it? I don't know why I don't. Why don't I? I don't know. So yes, if you want to do the cowl, it starts on the 1st of May and runs for 2 months. I'll show you the shawl. In the introduction to knitting, I will have put some pictures in there for you to look at, and I did put it on my Instagram page. And after I'd finished knitting it, I didn't want to aggressively block it, so I think I've used one of these pictures. I pegged it out on my line in the garden, and I put a lot of pegs across the top to keep a nice taut line, and then I very carefully, at the points at which I wanted to bring in some shape, I just hung a peg, and its own weight just gently pulled the shawl out to where I wanted it to be. And then it was a lovely summer day, and the breeze and the sun combination dried it very, very quickly, and it has a lovely smell. I do like my washing to be outside. And here is the said shawl. It is absolutely enormous. I believe it's around 100 inches from end to end. So don't ask me to do the math on that, because I can't. 100 inches, you work it out. And its depth, can't remember. I did put it on the Instagram post. If you look on my Instagram, which is the Beady Butterfly, and flick through the pictures, you will see a picture of it hanging on the line, and I believe it's got the measurements on there. The concept that I had, as I explained last week, about the fading petals as the flowers bloom, I think for me, this is my visual kicking in, it works a treat. Where the pegs went in, if you look very carefully along that bottom line, you will just see little ripples. That's all I wanted from it. I didn't want a solid straight line. I don't know whether you heard that. That's Penny trying to get in. She jumps up on the door and then hangs there looking through the glass. Oh, hello, Penny. There she is. I wish you could see it. I really do. Maybe I'll take a picture one day. And of course, yeah, the little ripple, there we go. That's what I was talking about. I didn't want the heavy line, straight line. I wanted it to just have a little bit of fluidity there. And all the beads which sit in that lace section, which may or may not come through on the screen. Get a little bit closer. Just like raindrops sitting on the petals. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. It is huge. And it is so soft. That Pook GB yarn. Totally recommend it. It's lovely, lovely, lovely yarn. 100% merino. I think it was 365 meters for a 100-gram ball. And it's just fluid. You'd think with the beads. Now, how many beads? I reckon, golly, I'm going to guess. It's 2,500 maybe. 2. There are loads, because what I decided to do in the end was a little concerned about how the edge of the shawl would sit. What I didn't want it to do at any time, and any shawl has a tendency to do this, I did not want it to curl up. I know sometimes petals do, but I wanted it to sit really smooth with my own sort of little rippled effect. So I put a bead every other cast off stitch. And my cast off method was, can't remember. I made it up. I know it does exist, but at the time I just went with it. I believe what I did was I knitted my first stitch. I'm just visualising in my head now. I knitted my first stitch, then I knitted the second one, and then I put the 2 back onto the left hand needle, and then I knit the 2 together. I think that's what I did. And then that left me with one on my left, so I knitted another off, that left me one on my right, then I knit another one on the left, and then I knit those 2 together, and I went along the line like that. There's a name for it. You'll all know what it is. You're probably screaming at me what the name is. But with every other stitch, I popped a bead on before I knit it. And so it sits in its knitted place, like a little column. Can we see that? There we go. Every stitch would have been crammed in too tight. I just wanted a little glimmer. And it's enough to give the shawl sort of stability and to anchor the edge more. It doesn't feel heavy and cumbersome, and when you wear it, it's so comfortable. So there we go, the Budding Bluebell shawl by Mina Phillip, Knitting Expat. Thank you, Mina, for giving me that chance to knit it. I highly recommend it. So there we go, that's that number 3. Now the last one, I've only just finished. It's very, very, very slightly damp. It was on the blocking mats all day yesterday, but it's been a bit cold, so it hasn't dried completely. This one is a test knit for Libby Johnson, who is Truly Myrtle. She just put out a Instagram request and I said, yes, I'm here, I'm available, and so she sent me the pattern. And it's a Deco-esque pattern. She said that's her description, not mine. However, I went with the Deco because it's one of my favourite periods in history for art and architecture and costume and music. And so I embraced the Deco and went with it and put some beads in, and I am thrilled to bits. Now I'm holding it back because I'm so happy with it. I just want to go boom. But I'll give you a little bit of a brief background on it. Let's have a look at the card. That's Hohi and that's Mina's shawl, which I didn't go into too much detail because I've already done that last week. So this one is called Zelda at the moment. It may change its name. I know Libby is sort of working on that. I used 4mm needles on a 100cm circular. Could have been a longer one, but I got by with 100cm. 120 probably would have been a more comfortable knit in the end. I used, and it was the little black and white sample I showed you, Lana Grossa. Now, the reason this is slightly heavier weight than was recommended, the pattern recommends, do I have it? I'm just going to stretch, excuse me. Sorry about that. The pattern recommends outlaw yarn. I couldn't find it anywhere apart from on the website, and it's a New Zealand yarn. And it's 45% Polworth, 45% alpaca and 10% possum. I would have loved to have used it, but I couldn't get it in time. And this particular one was Bohemia Sport, and it's a sports weight yarn. So I had to find an alternative. However, when I looked at the shawl, I'll show you a pattern without giving any detail away. There we go. It'll have better pictures on the pattern. This is just the test knit pattern. I felt it looked like it was going to be quite a wintry weight shawl, not something I would wear in the summer. So I decided to go for a slightly heavier yarn weight, slightly, and because it's black and white, I felt it could take an outdoor feel to it. So for me, this is something you add over as a layer, maybe over a jacket or a coat. I personally wouldn't wear it close to my neck because of the wool issue, but anybody who's not got anything issues like that could. It's 80% wool, 20% polyamide. It's quite a meaty, toothy yarn. I have no problems knitting with it. Interestingly, wool doesn't affect me in that way in my hands at all. It has a lot of these stray. Now, I bet the camera won't pick that up. Let's see if I can hold it on there. Has a lot of these long stray strands, so I'm wondering what those could be. Some of them are more wiry than that, and I had a tendency to pull them out as I went along. They were really in the white, not in the black. These balls are 150 gram balls, and that gives you 390 meters, and the pattern called for 340 of each colour. And you'll note at this point that there is more white than black left. I was intrigued by that, and then I kind of looked more constructively at what I was doing and realised why. I'm not going to tell you why. You can knit and find out. However, these balls each had 390 meters and 150 grams, and I had 3.8 grams of the black left and 10.5 of the white. Someone else will have to work that out in meterage. I haven't got a clue. And it took, I started it on the 18th of May and I finished it on the 28th of May, so it took me 10 days. And that's adding beads. If I didn't add beads, then it would have been a week's worth of work. And a week's worth of work well spent. So the shawl itself. Want to see? I want to show you. First of all, I'm going to show you the inside, because in its own way, I actually quite like it. And if I were to do this shawl again, I might position my beads so that they go both sides. This is the inside of the shawl. It has a very subtle colour pattern to it. And if I did it again, I would highlight these lines, possibly black beads, or maybe beads that move, you know, like a picot of beads, something that tassels perhaps off the peaks. But as I work with beads a lot, that would be definitely something that I would enjoy experimenting with. So that's your reverse. Isn't it stunning? Now if you think that looks nice, here is your shawl. It starts as a circular pattern, very much like Highland Peaks, Mina's Highland Peaks. Completely different knit construction, a completely different increase of stitches, but the radiating circle of stripe, very similar, it put me in mind. What this yarn has given me is something really spongy and warm, so I'm looking forward to the winter on this one. As we come down, we've come into the pattern section, which for me looked like a New York 1920s tower. Is it the Chrysler? Can't remember. King Kong climbing up the peak there. Look, if you look closely, you can see King Kong. And so I added the beads into the centre of the stitch pattern. Now, someone asked me, I believe it was Eva, of The Charm of It, my beading technique. Would I go talk about it a bit more? So what I do, and there are two techniques to beading. I think I've touched on this before, but I'll try to be more explicit with it. There are two techniques of beading into knitting that I know of. I'm sure there are many other ways of doing it, but the two techniques that I use are largely dependent on what I'm knitting. This particular one, the technique I used, I'm just reaching back here, this is my pot of beads for this actual shawl. I have a hook. Now this particular one is a modern one and isn't the one that I used for this shawl. I have a hundredweight of crochet hooks of that size because I found a lot at my mother's house, and the one that I used is an old I'm going to say it's a 1930s one. It has some tooled engineering on the stem and a very, very, very long, fine tapering shaft to a small hook. The size is a 5.5 Old English size. What that is in English, in modern terms, I have no idea. This is a modern one, and it's a 0.75 mil, and it's bigger than this. So I'm going to guess at 0.5 mil. That's a guess. And if anyone can tell me why it would have a knobble on the end and what it is for, I'd love to know. I have no idea. It makes it more weighty on the end, but it has no benefit to crochet at all. And the pattern on the handle does give you a little bit of grip. However, what I was after was that long shaft. So what I do is I reach the point in the pattern where I decide I'm going to add my beads, and I work that out by reading the chart on the pattern and then marking the stitch where I'd like the bead to be. One of my visual learner things is transferring this, I prefer to work on the written instruction, and somehow, and I've always done this right from learning, is I read the pattern and it comes out, it goes in through the eyes, and in the brain it turns into the pattern in 3D. So I read my line, work out by reading the pattern and looking at the chart, and work out where I want to put my beads by seeing the pattern in 3D in my head. That probably makes no sense whatsoever, but it works for me. And so I reached the point at which I know I'm going to add some beads. And on this one, what I ended up with, I'm just trying to find a place to put these beads where they're not going to fall over all over the floor. Don't fall. So in this particular one, for instance, as I came down these lines, this one here has a lot of stitches in between, so it probably didn't apply on that row. I'm just going to turn that around. However, when I came down to somewhere like here, I'd have a whole section of beads and then some knitting and then a whole section of beads, which meant I could load up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 beads. So I'd take my little pot and I'd gather up one. This comfortably holds a maximum of 5 beads, sometimes 6 if they weren't as fat. They're quite uneven beads, which I quite liked. So there we go. I have loaded up 5 beads on the hook, and as I'm knitting away, I hold my hook like that. I knit English and flick, not quite like Mina, because my right needle sits in my hand across the V of my thumb and forefinger, rather than holding over and working my finger. I support my needle and then work my finger, because it works with my tension technique. So my beads are sitting on my hook there, and as I'm knitting and I come to the place where I want my bead to sit, I then have my first bead, and the stitch where it is going is still on the left hook. So as we all know, if we have done any beading, you pick up the stitch that you're working your bead into with your hook. Let's come a little closer. So it picks up the stitch, then you slide your bead over onto that stitch. The stitch is held by the hook and the bead is moved down the legs of the stitch. You then slip your stitch back on to your left needle. So that's the point at which I've just transferred one bead over. I then pop that back in that hand. So now I have got that working stitch with a bead in it. Now rather than work it, I slip it. And that means that that unworked stitch has a bead sitting in its legs. Now if you work the stitch, you push your bead down. Now it depends on the visual that you want to achieve. I liked, put those back over there. I liked the way that these beads, they just travel a little up and down the leg of the stitch. There's a little bit of movement to them. Personally, for a shawl, if they are anchored into their position too tightly by knitting the stitch that the bead is on, you can end up preventing some of the stretch in blocking, and so it becomes quite firm. Now you might want that effect, for instance, if you're beading a pot or a cushion or something like that. You might want there to be much more of a denser fabric and a firmer base for your beading. So you would actually knit that stitch, and that anchors it into place and tightens up that stitch quite a lot, and you don't get the stretch in your fabric. I didn't want that with a shawl. I obviously wanted it to have some movement. So I don't actually knit the stitch that the bead is sitting in. Slip it onto the right needle, carry on, come to the next place where the bead is going to sit, hook it through, push it down onto the legs of the stitch, slip it onto the right needle and carry on knitting. And so that's the technique that I used on this shawl. The other technique to use is to pre-thread your beads. Now, I used to do that a lot, and as you knit away, you slide up your bead, and it's quite difficult to describe this one, but as you're knitting, you've got the right side facing you as you come with your bead. You bring the bead into play that you want to use, bring your yarn forward, slip this working stitch, bring the yarn back, and the bead is sitting in front of that unworked stitch basically. So it is on a loose thread running across your work. Personally, I prefer that technique if I'm using beads, more than one bead in a stitch. So for instance, you might have them sitting in a wraparound. I haven't actually, let's have a look. Let's fish out this one. So let's have a look at this spacing on this lace. If I wanted to add beads to this, and I wanted them to sit within the lace work, but I wanted them to have more than one bead in one place. So I want to have, in this yarn over section here, I want to have 3 beads. I would have preloaded my yarn with all my beads, and then as I come to my wraparound, I would slide up my 3 beads, do my wrap and carry on, so that when I unstitch, what I've got is a whole line of 3 stitches running in that space. And you can do that with any number. So you might have, I don't know, 10 beads in that space, and it's a really long stitch. So you would wrap to appropriate to that stitch size that the pattern instructs you to do, and you've loaded your 10 beads in that wrap there. So that's pre-strung technique. If you want to do a colour sequence, you can also use that technique. But yeah, it's a huge risky one, because if you don't pay attention and you miss out a bead, that's a lot of fiddling to get it right. Also, you can't overload too many, because the friction that's caused, particularly on single ply wools, friction when you move your beads up and down your thread, bring them into play, can eventually wear your thread out, your yarn out a little. So you don't overload too much, which means you've got to break and reload and break and reload. So in the end, I really prefer to use the crochet hook method. And what I end up with is something as beautiful as that. I am very, very pleased with this. So comment I will take on board. I'm sure there are lots of comments people could make, and what they see might be different to what I see, but I'm so thrilled with it. It is going to be a really warm shawl to wear in the winter. Thank you, Libby, for giving me the chance to knit that. Her pattern's not out yet. I don't know when it's going to be released. I believe it's the end of May. That's a guess, total guess. I did knit this pattern up really quickly, and I'm quite sure she wasn't expecting it to be done this quickly. But it was a joy to knit, and being a 4mm needle and DK weight, it went really quickly. And as I say, it is huge. The size on this, I'm afraid, I don't know. I am going to say it's as big as the budding bluebells across that line there. Let's take the centre point. Knowing that from here to these fingers is a metre, because I measured it once. That's a metre. And then there's that. So I'm going to say 1.5 meters. So that's 3 meters. That top line is 3 meters long. And this is going to be 0.5 meter. See, I throw the word meter in as if I know what that means, but I haven't got a clue. I work in feet and inches, I'm afraid. Visualising again, I know what 12 inches looks like. And then I know how big things are. That's about 12 inches. Foot. The size of my son's foot is 12 inches. So, those are all my finished items, and thrilled am I. I have a snag on my thumbnail. I've lost all my fingernails lately. I was doing gardening. Now I've got a snag and it's catching. Sorry about that. So, yeah, finished items, all done. Really pleased with all of them. And so what are my plans and what am I working on? So, what am I working on? I am still struggling along with those socks. I've only got 2 things here because I'm, threw myself into the shawls. So, the fail on the Fine and Dandy, I think that's what they were. I remember I showed you I'd done 1 sock. I have cast on and I am approaching pretty much there. I've lost the pattern, so I'm reading the other sock. Fortunately, I managed to start exactly the same place, so they are exactly the same. So I'm just reading what I did here, counting a few things, and as they're only going to be for me, if I'm slightly off, it doesn't really matter. I've tried that one on, it fits fine. And there is pretty much a foot. You'll note the difference in sole to upper, because just a simple act of knit 2 purl 2 every now and again shortens up the length. There's lots of stretch in it, that's fine, but just shortens it up. Now the yarn, for those, I can't remember whether I mentioned it before, the heels, toes and cuffs are another one of those random balls of wool. 100% wool, no idea what the make is, can't remember, it's been in there for so long. And the main yarn, ooh look, hot socks. It's slightly different variation on the previous one. Bargain sock from Amazon, 75% wool, 25% poly, and a much nicer yarn than the other one. Not quite so robust, softer, and knits true to the size that I usually come up with, so it must be slightly finer. What's the meterage on that? I wonder if that would help. The meterage on this, 210 meters for 50 grams, whereas the other one, and here's where my filing system comes into play, was exactly the same, 210 for 50 grams. So what's the difference? Who knows? Different type of wool probably. If anyone's got a answer to that question, feel free to comment. We can start a conversation. So yeah, very pleased. I did a little bit of that last night, going on a treat. And the only other piece that I'm working on, which again I did a little last night, but you'd never notice, is another Libby Johnson pattern that I talked about a couple of weeks ago, and that is Joss. Very unusual shawl, and I've done the big point, and I've actually done less than she calls for in her pattern. She calls for a rectangular section, which is from here to here, so that's no increases here, even though you wouldn't think so the way the pattern works. Clever, clever, clever. She calls for 61 stripes. No, 61 or 62? 62 stripes. And I've only done 46 because I'm not a tall person, and already, this is going to be ridiculous trying to work this out. Here we go. I've already got nearly 1.5 meters, and I've only done probably half the shawl. So it's going to be another 3 meter long. And it's a wrap because, of course, it's a different shape completely. The needles I'm using are higher circulars with their lovely twirly things. And the size is as the pattern calls for, so 3.75, I believe. Yep, 3.75 mils, which is it says on here, can't read them. No, can't read it. So sorry for the US size. This she says in her pattern, which I will very quickly look at. 5, US size 5. And yeah, it's pootling along nicely. I'm at the lacy section now, which I've just come into. MrBB's about to walk in. Let's alternate there and there. Hello, MrBB. What can I do for you?
Would you like a cup of tea?
Yes, please.
What would you like?
Mint, please.
Mint.
Thank you. Lovely. I might keep that in. My personal slave. Yeah. What was I saying? He's completely throwing me now. Oh yes, lace. So I'm on the lace section. Yeah. No, I'm not sure if I haven't made a mistake, or if it's a mistake in the pattern. I'm sure it's me, because one side looks like I expected it to look, and one side doesn't. So we'll see. I might just continue, and I'll have my own bit of designing going on in that. It looks fine. It just doesn't probably look the way the pattern says it should. But the stitch count is the same. It's just the way they're sitting. So I don't know. We'll see. So that's coming along nicely. It won't be long before I'm towards the end of that one, as I'm only working on these 2 items. I've got a lot of things brewing and a lot of bits and pieces that I want to finish. So we'll see how that goes. A bit of spinning. I haven't done any sewing at all, I don't believe. No, I haven't done any sewing. I've done some spinning, and I'm working with a hedgehog fibres. It's merino, alpaca, silk and camel. I'm not 100% sure about this. I thought it would be much softer, and there's something, one of those fibres is stopping the luxuriousness of it, in my opinion. I haven't brought what I've done yet spun. I'll show you that when it's spun. What I've done is I've split the bat. No, it's a combed top, beg your pardon. I've split it into 2, and I went down this way so that I've roughly got 2 the same. This is just where I've taken it off the wheel, and I'm just drawing as it comes. There's nothing special about it at all. And so when I do the other one, it will be pretty much the same, and when I ply, I should sort of get what you can see, hopefully. Slight variation because, for instance, when this dark red is spun, it mixes in and barber poles a little with what it's sitting with, which is nice, and it'll double barber pole along the way. It'll be interesting, see what comes out. But as I say, it's not 100% as soft as I thought it was going to be, and it's quite difficult to draw. There's quite a bit of resistance, so it's quite hard going on the thumbs as I draw it through. I pull, you can see just by the fact that my fingernails are going white how much I'm having to pull on that in order to draw. But it's quite a fine fibre, and it's got a long staple, length of that. So we should get a nice yarn out of it. See, I've got a long way to go, and then all over again. That probably won't be finished for a little while. I'm only spinning in the evenings. MrBB and I went out shopping to IKEA last weekend because dear little Django got hold of my fibre yet again. I just purchased some gorgeous Rolags from Fondant Fibre and just put them to one side to put them away properly at another time, and the living room door got left open, and in he went and saw them and pulled on their ends. So about 3 or 4 of the Rolags are now much longer and much wispier. So I got a little bit upset about that and decided that it's up to me to make these things unavailable for him. So I bought a 4-box shelving unit, which everyone buys for their yarn storage, and then I bought 4 purple fabric drawers, and all my fibre's gone in them, so it sits like a column of 4. I might insert a picture. Film for you to see. It looks really nice in the living room actually against my loom and wheel. And the other thing I wanted to show you, talking of fondant fibre, as I say, I bought some fibre, some Rolags, natural Rolags in a beautiful creamy colour. I haven't brought them in because they don't look so pretty now that the dog's been playing with them. However, I also bought these 2 skeins of yarn, and I will show you these because they're so pretty. It's not something I do very often. Here comes my tea. Excuse me. Doff your cap as you enter.
I would pull my forelock, but I don't have one.
Thank you.
Very hot.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Tea. Vicar. Thank you. Yeah, so fondant fibre, and I don't show yarn purchases very often. Don't know why. You see them when I work them, so that's fine. And lots of people do, so there's enough shoppers out there. This, though, is beautiful yarn. I do like Deb's yarns. They're very soft and plush. This is called Potter. That's her base. Superwash Polwarth, New York in the dark. So it's a 4-ply, 400 meters to 100 grams. And I do like that. I'm hoping that the brown will come through as the strong colour, not the pink. I'm not a hugely pink person. I have no idea what I'm going to use it for. I just liked the colour. I do like brown a lot. I might use some brown so that the brown becomes strong within, don't know yet, be inspirational. And then the other one, again Potter Superwash Polwarth, is Lux per Corner, same details, and that has purple, which is my favourite colour, hence the purple on me. Lovely. That's her label. I think everybody knows Fondant Fibre, and a worthy yarny lady she is too. I keep all my yarns in plastic, all of them where I can, certainly anything that has wool in it, because my studio is in the garden, and if anything's going to get moths, it's going to be this. As airtight as I think I might be, I can't be, because I'm getting cobwebs. So if they're getting in somewhere, and if a spider gets in, a moth's going to get in. So everything's in plastic bags. I normally take the air out, so I'll seal it up. Leave a little hole. Squeeze all the air. Squish, squish, squish. Close up the hole, hopefully. And so when the yarn springs back, it sucks what spare air there is into itself, so it retains some of its squishiness. But the spaces around the bag are quite tight. And I do that because it takes up less space. That's the only reason. I'm sure there's a better reason for doing that, but for my reasoning, it takes up less space. So that's the only purchase that I'll show you. I've got lots of plans coming up. Something I haven't shown you that I will very, very quickly. I did a tea. Well, it was intended as a gift initially. Ine from This Old Knit talked about her favourite tea, and she happened to put a quote for Tazo teas, I think it was. They put very lyrical descriptions of their teas on the sides of the packets, and she read out this lyrical tea, and I said, oh, that sounds fab. And she said, oh, do I see a swap coming on, and if you'd like some, I'd like, can you get me blah? And so we did a tea swap, and I sent her the stuff, which I know she got because she put it on her podcast. And I waited with great anticipation for my Tazo tea, and it never turned up, because somewhere between here and there is a post office enjoying some lovely tea. However, that was fine. The whole reason for doing it was because she wanted to have some of her favourite tea, and it made me happy to find it for her and share. However, she wasn't going to let it go, bless her, and she resent a parcel. And she said, it won't get lost this time because cashmere's at stake. She messaged me. I thought that's quite funny. Anyway, blow me down. It turned up really quickly, so I don't know whatever happened to the first one. And then she put in some yarn, which is milled in her hometown, which is so, so sweet of you. Thank you, Nina. So the tea that I got, I've tried pretty much all of these actually. The Tazo Apricot Vanilla Cream. I think that was the one that she originally showed. So there's 2 of each of these teas. So there's, hands gone backwards, Tazo. And then I've got 2 ginger tea, which MrBB's earmarked because he does like a bit of ginger. So I promised him those, because I'm generous that way, and he can't have any of the others. Another Tazo, which is the organic sultry strawberry. And then I've got some organic Earl Grey. I love the packaging on this one. This is 2 leaves. Now, if we get that in this country, I haven't spotted it, so I will look out for that. Nice instructions. I love the bags on those. And this one, again, like the instructions on these, this is organic African Nectar, mightyleaf.com. I do like the tea bag on that. A couple of those. And the last one, which this is the one that really intrigues me, and I'm looking forward to trying this now that I've shown you. And this is Numi Organic Tea Toasted Rice, nutty and savoury smooth green tea. So I am going to try that this afternoon. That looks very, very interesting. Can you hear the rain? I hope you can. I love the sound of rain. Something raw and natural about it. I love being out here in the rain. And so what she also included in the parcel, which was so kind of her, and yes, I am going, as per your suggestion, I'm going to do cuffs, not mittens. I'm going to do some cuffs. So she included this. Is that not lovely? And this is 50% cashmere and 50% baby alpaca. 2.5 ounces, 215 yards. And it's a very, very interesting yarn construction. See what we can do to show you. This is like a chain. I know there are lots of yarns that do this. I know it's not rare or unusual in itself, but I haven't knitted with anything like this at all yet. Reminds me a little bit of a cotton yarn. Interesting. Very soft, very, very squishy. Sorry, Mina, pinching your chin. Yeah, I think that will be very nice, very glamorous as a cuff. So I shall do something with that. I believe it was a Pink Hair Girl. She did Mrs. Beaton's cuffs or something like that. I'll have to Ravelry pop that in and see what comes up. And they were quite lacy and they used different types of yarns and various things. So see what I can come up with. Something we'll show. Actually, just picking it up now. Now it's too dark. So there we go. That's a very, very kind and generous gesture and a treasured piece of yarning to come. I shall enjoy wearing those. For trips and plans out, I have got, they're doing Support Your Local Yarn Shop Day tomorrow, which will be Saturday, which I shall support. And I have two really lovely local yarn shops in Bath. One is the Wool Bath and one is a Yarn Story. I've done Wool Bath. I like their shop very much, very cosy and inviting, and they have the most enormous black lab that sits and, well, actually lolls on their sofa, and you can go in and be licked and pawed, and it's all good fun. I've never been into a Yarn Story. That shop's on Walcott Street, which is quite a famous shop in Bath, street in Bath. Used to be full of reclamation yards and shops. Not so much so now, because so much stuff is sold online, but it's still a joy to walk down, and they have a fantastic market on a Saturday, so maybe that one will be open too. Antiques market. I've still got John Arbon in May, 14th, 15th of May. That's their open mill day, so that'll be fun. So lots to do, lots coming up. We'll talk about what I can and share what else I've done. So I would like to close today with a little quote, which I'm just reaching for now. I've written it down because it's important to get it right. And it's from Breen Brown, who is a research professor in Houston College studying social life. Can't remember exactly, but she's a professor in Houston. And she's an author and public speaker, and if you put her name into TED's talks, you will be able to listen to a lot of her talking. But this quote I thought was relevant for today's episode. To me, constructive criticism is when people take ownership of their ideas. That's why I don't listen to anything anonymous. But it's hard. When there's something hurtful out there, I still want to read it over and over and memorise it and explain my point of view to the person. So, perhaps when we see the thumbs downs and what we might perceive as a negative comment or some criticism, we see it as the start of a conversation. So take care, and I'll see you again soon.